You're listening to Vantage Revival. Please enjoy this encore presentation of Season 1, Episode 4, American Murder, The Family Next Door, originally uploaded September 19th of 2021.
Today on Vantage Revival, we watch a Netflix original documentary produced by James Marsh, released September 2020. This documentary is a timeline storytelling of the Watts family murders that occurred in 2018. Chris Watts confessed to killing his pregnant wife Shanann and two daughters, Bella, aged 4, and Cece, aged 3. American Murder, A Family Next Door, now playing on Vantage Revival. I want to know, just give me your general opinion on the documentary style, because I know it was not something that you loved. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay, so this documentary was done in a way that was very, like, Facebook-like. Mm-hmm. A lot of its clips were taken from what appears to be a Facebook page. A lot of the interviews are taken from clips that were posted by the wife or the friends of the people involved. I wish that there had been some actual interviews in this documentary. I don't think there was one, like, real interview from the creators talking to someone about this. Everything was taken from a source. Mm-hmm. Everything was taken from a Facebook page, taken from another interview done by someone else. So for me, I was very disappointed that it almost felt like anyone could have made this documentary just by collecting these clips and then editing them together. It felt like there was no work put in by the actual filmmakers of this documentary, at least for me. The
style of the documentary for me was very well put together, knowing the Chris Watts case. So I have probably spent 50 odd hours researching Chris Watts and this case since it came out. I've watched
50 hours? I don't mean to cut you off, but 50 hours?
Guarantee.
This story is a 5-minute story.
Guarantee you. They have all of the footage from the police. That's 3 hours long. They have the full interrogation of Chris Watts. They've got endless amounts of documentaries detailing out everything. And I've watched a lot multiple times to try and get as much information as possible. I've watched them walking through the house to see if I can pick out anything suspicious. Even though I knew the outcome, I was like, what more could I find? I was so invested in this case. It's all I watched. So when they actually came out with a documentary, what I liked about it, the reason that they do it in a Facebook style is because Shanann was
she was a multi-level marketing thing.
So she's one of those girls that spends a lot of time posting about her life online. And when you go to her Facebook page, you can watch some of those clips. And that was, even for people who were invested in the Chris Watts case before this documentary came out, we only had a few little clips from her Facebook page that we could view to kind of get like a look into her life before she was murdered. And being someone who's very into true crime, that is what I like. And a lot of true crime lovers like being able to dig into a victim or murderer's life. And this documentary opened up a world of stuff that we had no access to. New clips, new videos from her life that weren't ever posted online, and the first time they came to light was in the documentary. So for me, the style was awesome because putting so much time into Chris Watts' stuff, all I'd ever seen was a walkthrough of the house, a couple of videos of Shanann's from Facebook, and the interrogation, where now you get to see text messages of when she left, you get to see what they were talking about, when he was cheating, all that stuff. So to me, that's why I liked it, was because I've watched other things on this case, and this one was the best I've seen with the most information, to be honest with you.
If I had never seen a documentary before, I would be more happy with this movie, okay? I don't mean to laugh. I just felt like it didn't offer anything that I haven't seen already, and better in most cases. And that's kind of a common theme with movies, is like you have to be somewhat better than the majority of what you're competing against.
And I do agree. Like, I know that you have also seen Don't Fuck with Cats.
Which is like an amazing documentary. And that is very similar.
It's an amazing documentary, and that's what I'm just saying. We both agree that is a great documentary. But to me, the style is the same, other than
they have interviews.
They reached out to the people, which I believe that is the first time that they ever shown their face on camera. I know that they've done interviews in the past, and they've kept their identity secret.
With Don't Fuck With Cats, that kept the story moving. Because you were so motivated because this person is talking to us about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. And then this twist would come in and be like, oh God, I have to watch the next episode. And that person carried that journey. That was my problem with this. There was nothing carrying this journey. And I don't think Facebook videos was a strong enough point to keep me invested from beginning to end.
What could bringing in, let's say, Nicole Atkinson, which was her best friend, what would bringing her in and interviewing her carry on even more, though, that you're not seeing in Shanann's videos? She could be like, oh yeah, Shanann and Chris, you could tell that Shanann wore the pants.
But we're also guessing. Who knows? Maybe she did have more to say. Or maybe the emotion would have been stronger. Because the movie lacks emotion. You know, it shows us these clips, and they're usually very happy clips. And most of the drama comes from the text message, which you're just reading. So you kind of have to put your own emotion behind that. And as we all know, with any sort of written medium, especially text messages, we all interpret that different. So you may be completely invested in this fight they're having over text, and I'm just like, it sounds like a couple having a little spat. Like, I'm not really invested in this. Like, it's not pushing me far enough. I want documentaries to push me. I want to be shocked. I want to hear a story that I haven't heard before. I want to hopefully get a twist. It's not guaranteed in every story, but if there's a twist, even better. And I want to just feel connected. And I think because we don't have someone talking to us ever during this movie, I didn't feel connected. I just felt like I was watching someone collecting videos and showing me a collage of Facebook. I get your point of digging deeper into it, but that was on your own personal time, which is why you're invested. As someone who myself who did not invest that time, who won't invest that time, I think documentaries should give you every aspect of a story and not expect you to have to spend 50 hours going deeper into it. I want it to be cherry-picked and give me the best stuff. That's kind of where I see flaws in this. I was really let down really quickly in this documentary. So early on, we find out that Shanann is coming to the house late at night. She just got back from a trip to Vegas, I believe. And by the next morning, her best friend's calling. Shanann's not answering her calls, anything. So she calls the cops because she's nervous. They get permission to go inside the house, and the house is untouched. It looks just like it would any other day. And both Shanann and her two young daughters are also missing. There's also a few blankets that the girls would carry that's missing, but like the purse is still there, her cell phone is still there, her medication is still there. And at that point, I've already guessed what's happened, you know, because there's very few chances that somebody would leave and not take that stuff with them. There's key things you take with you. One would be your phone, one would be your medication, another would be your purse or your wallet, you know? No one just ups and runs away without that stuff unless they're trying to like lose their identity, and there was no reason for these people to lose their identities. So that was the first time I'm like, okay, obviously I feel it's the husband because the house is completely fine. The doors were locked. He left, no one came in, the doors wouldn't have been locked if they hadn't been, kind of stuff, right? And then the husband comes in and he is oddly calm. Now, I know everyone deals with, you know, grief differently and they react differently to their emotions when bad things happen. But I honestly feel that if your wife and two children were just up and missing, you would be frantic. And his reasoning was, oh, well, we had a fight, so she might have ran away. Okay, that's fine. But then she would have taken her purse and wallet and medication and her phone. Again, there's no reason to leave those things behind, even if you are running away after having a fight about infidelity. And so at that point, again, I just felt like, okay, it's him. Like, he is so calm. He was blinking a lot and like there's like those nervous tics. And those weren't like tics that I felt were from anxiety of being worried, but anxiety of holding on to a secret, and you don't want anyone to know you have a secret. That was the vibe he was giving off. Then they went to the neighbor's house who had camera footage of the parking lot of this said house. And yeah, it shows him pulling his truck backwards into the garage, I'm assuming, attached to the house. And that is the only footage. Now keep in mind, there's probably other people that have cameras in that neighborhood. It's a rich neighborhood. And that is the only footage they have of him backing up and then him leaving to go to work a few hours later. How possibly could it be anyone else when the camera footage shows her walking in at 2 a.m. from her flight and then him leaving at 6 a.m. to go to work, and there's no footage anywhere else of anyone leaving this house? The story is done. There is no way it could be anyone else because they have cameras around their house and there's no footage of anyone coming in or leaving outside of her coming in and him leaving. That is it. So at that point, I'm done with this story. I'm done with this documentary because there's nothing else to talk about. Everything is painted that it's him. And yes, there's a motive as to why, but the first, I want to say 50 minutes of this documentary is like, what happened to them? Who took them? Was it the husband? And it's just like, duh. It was hard to be invested when it was making me feel like I was stupid. Like, I feel like everyone could tell that it was the husband. Why are we giving 50 minutes to what happened to the mysterious disappearance? It was obvious. It was painfully... And even the neighbor was like, this guy's acting weird. He never acts like this.
Yeah, he's the hero in the story.
You know it. And the cop's like, oh, well, you know, people react differently. But I'm like, yeah, that's true. But you literally tell this guy is lying. And he's not panicked an inch that his wife and 2 children are missing.
Yes.
That is why I dislike this documentary. And I have a few more points we'll get into later, but I feel like I'm talking a lot, so...
No. Yes, you didn't know anything about the case, but a lot of people did know something about the case. Like, they knew before this documentary came out, Chris Watts was arrested for murdering his wife and kids. So I think going into this, none of us were like, I wonder who it could be. You know, except for you who didn't know anything, which is fine. But a lot of people that were excited to watch this documentary, myself included, knew everything about the case, and we just wanted to see what more could be dug up. A few things that really caught people's eye that were just exciting for us to watch when all of this information first came out was the way that Chris just shakes the officer's hand when he first gets home from work, goes in through the garage, closes the garage door, and doesn't let anybody in the house for a couple of minutes. And then he comes to the front and he says, yeah, you can come in. And this is after he's presumably walked through the house to make sure that he's cleaned up his crime scene. Now, it was done through strangulation, so there wasn't much to clean up, but the one thing that you do notice as soon as the officer walks into the bedroom is that the bed sheet is missing off the bed and all the pillows, and it's literally just an empty bed, which is something that, you know, doesn't really get talked about. Like, why is your bed just naked right now? Like, what happened there? And then they find her phone and they find her ring, and you can tell by this point her friend Nicole is like visibly worried, and Chris obviously is not. I will give you facts about things, and I think they might have been mentioned in the documentary. At that point, right after they found the ring, it is known now that Chris was texting his mistress at that time. So in the middle of everyone frantically running around their house trying to figure out where his wife is, he's texting his mistress, Nicole, being like, hey, what's for dinner? Like, just no care in the world. And obviously that's where it comes from, this like malicious, just did not care, horrendous murders that occurred. And I think that's why everyone's so invested in it, because it wasn't just like I'm mad at my wife, I'm gonna kill her and I'm gonna run away. It's like, I want to be with somebody else, I'm gonna kill my wife, and then literally while everyone is standing around me trying to find information, I'm just sitting here texting my mistress. And it's just something that was recorded so heavily that people became super invested in it. It's actually quite funny because in the timeline of the documentary and the video, it shows these 2 parts backwards, but when you put them in the correct way, it's very interesting to see when her best friend Nicole figures out that Chris did it. And it's when they're downstairs in the kitchen and she's like, she left her meds here, she wouldn't leave without her meds. You can kind of see it in her face. She's like, uh-oh, I know what happened. And then she goes back upstairs and they're talking with Chris about like the ring and the lifeline being her phone and all that stuff. And Chris kind of touches her and she visibly like pulls back and and like steps away, like, don't touch me, I know you're a murderer. So those are a couple things. I also wanted to point out some other things too that are kind of like bone chilling, is watching Shanann on her feed talk about how like she had lupus and Chris came in and saved her life and is her knight in shining armor and he's perfect for her and he would never hurt her, and so glad that she found him. And at their wedding, how the dad and the brother make this huge speech about how like Chris is perfect for her and we're so excited to have him in the family, only to have him go and murder her. Those are the things that make me enjoy the documentary. But once again, I'm super into true crime, whereas you're not so much into true crime, right? So
I mean, I would say I'm super not into it. I don't think I should have to invest in a storyline pre-watching a documentary. You know, and I understand what you're saying. If like people have been following this case before the documentary, they really want to see how he was acting. They're looking for these things. I can see how that would be a more exciting watch. But for myself, again, as someone who doesn't want to do the homework into diving into every single story, I still want to be entertained, you know? And I feel like there's other documentaries where I know nothing about them going into it. And by the end, I feel like I was living there, you know, and I feel like I'm fully invested. So I think that for me is why, again, I feel it was lacking, is that I'm not looking in that first 30 minutes during the house tour for like clues, right? I'm trying to figure out if he is the killer because I don't know anything about the story. And by the first 3 minutes, I already came to that conclusion based off what was happening. I'm not invested, right? So I don't think it's a documentary that is for people who are not in this story, or if you maybe shouldn't go into it blind, maybe go into knowing a little bit about it. But I still feel like it wasn't a big enough like twist or a big enough story to fill an hour and a half. I really feel this should have been like a 20-minute special on some documentary series, you know? I don't think it filled its time up very well. And I really thought there's gonna be a twist coming. And the twist was kind of the secret affair with Nicole.
yes.
I don't think that was a big twist, because I mean, I feel like, why do you kill your wife and children for no reason?
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen. So obviously there's someone else involved. But I really, really thought the twist was going to be that he was gay.
A lot of people think that.
I was like, oh God, that's going to be the twist. That's why he doesn't want to talk about this affair, not because he was having an affair, but because he's gay, and that's like embarrassing for him. And then it's just like, oh, he has a girl on the side. And I'm like, oh. I got let down kind of. So I also thought it was interesting that he would say things like, did I make her feel like she had to leave? And it's just like, okay, but like, again, she left her purse and like her phone. Like, no matter how you made her feel, you wouldn't leave those things. And then he said things like their fight was about losing passion. But then like a few sentences later was like, actually it was about me being accused of cheating. It's like, okay, you can't get your story straight within literally a paragraph what you're talking about.
Yeah, this is why I think that is why Chris Watts' case was such a big case, is because everyone was like, this guy's fucking dumb. Like, does he really think he's playing anybody? And that's why it blew up to be such a big case, is because
he was so dumb.
Here's the thing. What you experienced with this documentary is what every Chris Watts case lover experienced with it real time, because we automatically all knew Chris was the killer, and we're all like, are you that stupid? Because he was going on TV, and he was very straight face, emotionless, being like, I just want my kids back. And it was like, you're not fooling anybody. And that was a big thing, was like, everyone was like, is this guy so daft that he thinks that he can fool anybody right now because he's stupid? And the girl who does his lie detector says the same thing. She's like, you'd be so stupid to do this if you knew you were lying, because even she at that point knew, I don't know why we're doing this lie detector test because I know the answer.
They asked him, will you do the polygraph? And he said, sure. And I feel like if you were an innocent person, you would have been like, yes. You would have said the words, yes. Sure is such a like, okay, let's do it. Like, sure. And I just like, at that moment, I'm like, he would have said yes if he was innocent. He would have said no if he didn't believe that he could lie. And he said sure because he thought he could lie. But the person running the polygraph test and the cop that was there, they gave him the alibi. Not once did he ever say anything other than like, we fought about cheating, okay? But then they literally said to him, Chris, you know, chicks are crazy. Did Shanann do something to the children that made you want to hurt her? And like that was never brought up until that moment. And then they bring in his dad and he's like, yeah, she hurt the children. And I'm like, they literally just gave him an alibi. Like that was never even on his radar until they told him that.
And that's an interrogation tactic that detectives use. So they tried, you can actually watch, that's another part of my 50 hours. I watched a guy on YouTube, he breaks down every single tactic that detectives use. And that is a tactic that they use in the sense where Chris is not going to confess to this murder that he did by himself, and they know he's guilty of it. And they know, and they have all this information to arrest Chris, and they're just looking for a confession. So they pushed Chris to try and blame it on Shanann so that they could at least, he can at least admit that he killed Shanann and that they're dead. Because to this point, they keep going, Chris, we know they're dead. We know they're dead. And he goes, no, I want them to come home. I want them to come home. And they're like, geez. They needed him to admit that they were dead before they could turn it into him confessing to all three of the murders, right? So yes, that is a tactic that they did use going into it. He's like, I just want to talk to my dad. I just want to talk to my dad. But pretty much seconds after he admits to his dad that they knew that putting the dad in the room was going to get Chris to confess to something. And then they walk in seconds after Chris finally confesses to just killing Shanann after she killed the girls. And then that was their start. And then you hear them later go, okay, so we think this is half the story, but we know that there's more. Like, we know Shanann didn't kill anybody, right? That, to me, it's sickening how the whole time in the search and the beginning of the interrogation and all the news things, he shows no emotion. She says that he's not getting emotional and that chicks are crazy, and he starts crying. And then that's when he confesses, and he starts crying after that. And it's like, he's not showing emotion, not even in the sense where it's like, I need to show emotion to be believable. He starts showing emotion because he realized he's done.
Like,
and
yeah,
that
he's been caught.
His whole life, he'll rot in jail now, right? So that was just something that, like, I wanted to just, you know, it just sucks that this dude killed his whole family and couldn't show emotion until he realized that his life was over. Had no remorse. I want to talk about that video of his daughter Bella, where she's singing that song that goes, my daddy is a hero, he helps me grow up strong. Then we get to see all these like spooky, eerie videos that only become eerie after you know the story, right? Like, you watch Bella sing that in a car, you're like, oh, that's cute. And then to find out that her dad is not helping her grow up big and strong because he fucking murdered her, it becomes very creepy and eerie. So I think that that's also a thing that they were trying to do as well. It's like, look at all of these, look at them playing in the ocean together, look at, she's singing about her dad. He fucking strangled them to death and shoved them in an oil barrel. Like, that is horrible.
I get it. I get that there's people that are invested in these storylines. I just don't know how it was a movie. I am still trying to wrap my head around that.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So there's a part where it kind of clusters together like news broadcasts and such.
Okay.
And it's talking about, like, one of the lines is literally, Shanann drove Chris to kill her. What's your opinion on that? Knowing that was broadcast on national
drove
news.
her to kill her?
Yeah, so these people are saying Shanann's a bitch. She obviously drove Chris to kill her. Like, she's so crazy.
I get what you're saying.
How did you feel about that? After this woman gets murdered by her husband, this is what news is putting out about her.
Okay, so from my viewpoint of having worked in news for a brief period of time, is that we're supposed to go in as unbiased as possible, and we're also supposed to let other people tell the story. If that reporter had interviewed people and 4 out of 5 people said she was crazy, I'm going to say that that reporter probably did their job and shared what they found to be the case of who she was. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's accurate, and I'm not saying it's fair, but I don't think the news is always fair, and it's only accurate based off the people you speak to.
And I'm not so much mad about them calling her crazy. It's the her husband killed her because of her. Like, no one should ever say that someone who got murdered.
I can only assume if that was the title, potentially someone in that interview said that line.
She was like a Nancy Grace type.
Okay, and I think people like Nancy Grace, they are saying these things to cause an uproar because they want that attention. It's very much like, you know, Trump saying whatever he wanted to say to get that attention brought to him. So I can't take what Nancy Grace says as serious. If anything, it can be more damaging or hurtful, especially if the case is not solved or things are still trying to be figured out. So yeah, no, I don't think that it's fair, but it's a tactic to raise attention for yourself. You know, it's being controversial. When
they're at the neighbor's house and they're watching the footage, it cuts back to live TV for a second, and you see it's like a human fetus, cartoon human fetus.
Yeah.
And that's when Chris looks at the TV and goes, oh, and she's pregnant too. And it's just so gross because it's like the irony of, oh my God, there's an unborn fetus on this TV after they just watched a video of him dragging his dead wife, into a truck. And then, it's just so, that's just one big thing I just wanted to...
No, that's fair. And, like, I obviously, like, watching it the first time, I didn't really put that together.
Yeah.
But now that you said, I do remember that scene. And, like, yeah, it's, again, not funny, but it's interesting how those moments connect. And, like, completely unintentional. But it's just, like, at that moment, he's just like, oh, shit, a fetus. Oh, yeah, my wife, she was pregnant.
Yeah.
You know,
and he obviously did not want that kid. Obviously.
Well, yeah, that's why he didn't wait, right?
So it's just sad that someone who seems so normal, a guy who sat there and had a not a job, but he had a whole conference based on infidelity in marriage and when to end a marriage because it's just not worth it anymore. And, you know, by getting a divorce, not by taking them out and burying them. When you drop your friends off or when you drop family off, you always make sure they get into the door. And that clip of Shanann walking in before she dies was not something that was released in the first bit of all of this. So you could only watch interrogation footage and the body cam footage, but you couldn't watch anything else. And that got released like a year after, where we finally got to see her walking into her demise. And it's just so sad because Nicole waits for her to get into the house.
To make sure she's safe.
And then the second she drives away,
murdered.
She gets murdered. So that's just... Yeah, that's I love the documentary style because for me as a Chris Watts not a Chris Watts lover, a Chris Watts case lover.
So you stopped sending fan emails to him.
Yeah, well, people do that.
I know.
They're obsessed with him. As that, I think that the documentary was very well put together. 4 other documentaries out there. There's tons of Chris Watts documentaries. This one is the best that's out there for this case. I just want to point out too, it was, when it first released, for the first 5 months of its release, it was the most watched documentary on Netflix, and it still is in the top 3 most watched Netflix documentaries ever.
That's crazy, because there's so many good ones on there. I'm surprised that is a top one. I'm just curious what I'm missing. I'm just really curious.
And I think it could be too, is that maybe people going into it and watching it, even not knowing the case, and discovering that Chris was the murderer, I don't think that could be the end for some people. Whereas you were like, oh, I know who the murderer is, let's move on. Whereas some people are like, oh shit, there's a text message that we never got to see. Where's the mistress? And I want to see these videos that she's got posted online. Whereas even though you know the murderer, just like I said, for me, that's something that doesn't bother me. A lot of true crime shows, you know the murder within 5 seconds. It's pretty obvious. But it's the information that you get from it that makes it interesting, right?
And you're right. And don't fuck with cats, for example. We know who the murderer is right off the bat. So that's not the be all end all. I just felt like the evidence was just basic, you know? Oh, security footage. Found it. Where'd you go today? Oh, you went to work and there was an oil barrel there. Okay, obviously that's where the bodies are. It was paint by numbers for me. I can kind of guess where it was going to go next, and nothing shocked me. Even when the reveal of the mistress, I'm like, unless she was actively involved, I'm not going to be shocked by this. So,
and that was something that they did mention, but they didn't really put a lot of the mistress into the documentary, which is something that got me, because there was a year of them questioning this lady, being like, did you force him to do this? Did you have anything to do with this? And they didn't really cover that in the documentary, so I will admit that's something that they did miss out on, but that is, they looked heavily into her being the, not only the motive, but creator of this,
like
this plan.
What's the catalyst that forced him to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so every movie that we review gets a scoring system between 1 and 3 points. The first one is the edge of seat rating. Did it keep you engaged? I think you'll know where I'm at with this one. I did score it a 1, and I not much to say. You know how I feel.
So I scored it a 2.5. For me, once again, you guys, it's very clear how I feel. I think anything that has to do with a Chris Watts case, regardless of if I know the information or not, will always keep me on the edge of my seat. I'm always looking for things I missed before. So for me, yeah, 2.5.
Was this documentary original? I also gave it a 1. Again, I don't think it was anything that I haven't heard before of a spouse killing a partner, and I didn't really have anything that shocked me, so that warranted a 1 for me.
I gave this one a 2.5 as well. I see our scores are keeping
consistent
here. Yeah, for me, I think it's not original in the sense of Netflix documentaries in this style. There's obviously Netflix documentaries that do other things, but I do love the Facebook dive. I love everything you hate about it. So I think that's where we switch, and yeah, I gave that a 2.5.
Next is the climax / ending. Again, because I wasn't shocked by anything, it gets a 1.
I gave it a 1.5, actually. The ending, for me also, it wasn't anything special, and it wasn't anything, it was just kind of like, oh, he's in jail now, and then they did a little drone footage and said, Chris is in jail. And it just wasn't anything to like really close out how crazy this case actually was. There was no information being like, this was a worldwide, 1.5.
Yeah, I'm going to add something onto that really quickly, I'm not saying this has to be in every documentary, but if you make me cry, I guarantee I'm going to like you a lot more. And because I didn't cry in this documentary, I just couldn't rate it higher. I want to feel something. I didn't get that from this ending.
Mm-hmm.
Next is the script. So again, this is going to be the flow of the documentary based off who's talking and kind of the ins and outs of the conversations. I originally scored this higher, but then after I thought about it, having no real interviews, I had to give it a 1.
So I gave it a 3. But once again, we know that it's because I'm completely opposite of your opinion when it comes to the documentary. And what we did get to see as a person who has seen a lot of the case, we got to see a lot more. Our world was opened up to so much more in the documentary than what we've seen just on YouTube and online. So for me, it was a 3.
And lastly, would I watch it again?
Can I answer for you? He gave it a 1. That means no.
I did give it a 1, and that means no.
So I obviously put 3 because that would be, I think, my 5th or 6th time watching that documentary. So I would definitely watch it again. And I mainly watch it to show other people. I never just sit down. Well, that's a lie. I have sat down alone twice and watched it just by myself. But I typically watch it to show other people, and I will show more people. It's a very interesting documentary to me, and I really like it.
And that's all that matters, right? It's exposing what you love to other people and sharing information. Yeah. So I am thankful to have watched it.
No, you're not.
No, I am.
To know that I never want to watch it again.
Because it sets a bar for me for the next documentary that we watch. Yeah. So unfortunately, with a high score of a max of 15, it got a 5 from me.
And it got a 12 from me.
So out of 30, it got a total of 17, which is our lowest ranking movie of this week.
Yes, it is.
And Urban Legend is still the #1 spot for the movie
really
list.
Good movie.
So until next week.
Until next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Vantage Revival.